I never thought a mailbox would be the thing that drove me over the edge. When I bought my first home, a cozy little red-roofed house on the corner of Oak Ridge Lane, I figured the worst thing I'd have to deal with was mowing the lawn, or maybe the occasional passive-aggressive neighbor. I was wrong. Very wrong. Because 3 weeks after I moved in, my mailbox was lying in the ditch like it had just survived a demolition derby. At first, I honestly thought it was an accident. Maybe a delivery truck had backed into it or some teenager took a wrong turn trying to drift. It wasn't a big deal. I replaced it myself that afternoon, stuck it back in the ground, leveled it out, and didn't think too much about it. Until it happened again. The second time, it was worse. Bent metal, broken post, mail scattered across the yard like confetti. It didn't feel like a coincidence anymore, but I still tried to give the benefit of the doubt. Maybe someone didn't see it in the dark. Maybe a snowplow? Except, we live in Georgia. It was 72 degrees that day. I started to get that weird feeling in my gut. The one that tells you this isn't just bad luck, this is personal. So I did what any rational adult would do. I replaced the mailbox again, but this time I installed a cheap motion sensor camera on the garage aimed directly at it. I wanted to know exactly who, or what, was behind this, and that's when I saw it. The footage showed a big white SUV slowly veering off the road, casually taking out my mailbox like it was a traffic cone. No swerving, no braking, just a soft, steady crush, and then gone, like it never even happened. I paused the video, and then I saw her, and it was Karen. Now, I didn't know her name was Karen yet, but she looked like a Karen. You know the type, short blonde bob, oversized sunglasses, lips permanently pursed like she just tasted something sour. I'd seen her once or twice walking her Pomeranian in heels. Never said hello, never waved back when I did. But I recognized her car, a white BMW X5 with chrome rims and a bumper sticker that said, HOA, strong. I was stunned. I mean, why would someone do this? What did I ever do to her? I tried to be reasonable. I walked down the street that evening and knocked on her door. She answered like she was expecting the Queen of England. Didn't even say hi, just stood there with one eyebrow raised. "Hi," I said. "I think your car might have accidentally hit my mailbox. Twice, actually. I just wanted to show you the footage, so you knew... Maybe it was a blind spot, or he cut me off." "The mailbox has been encroaching on community property lines," she said, like she had rehearsed the line in front of a mirror. "It's a violation of our neighborhood visual uniformity standards." "Excuse me? It's too tall. It's not how I prayed. I sent you a letter." She had. A 4-page letter, folded in triplicate, slipped into my door the day I moved in. I thought it was a welcome packet. Turns out it was a list of 37 rules, none of which I remembered signing off on. "I didn't know that," I said, "but wouldn't it have been better to just talk to me instead of, running it over with your car?" Karen smiled. A warning was issued, and then she shut the door. I stood there on her porch, blinking, like I had just been sucker punched by a passive-aggressive hurricane in yoga pants. I walked back home, feeling like I had entered a bizarre alternate version of Stepford, one where the HOA president played demolition derby with people's property and called it enforcement. I was mad, but more than that, I was confused. Was this really how people handled disputes here? I wasn't looking for a fight, but I also wasn't about to keep spending $60.00 a week on new mailboxes just because Karen had a vendetta. That night, I sat down, reviewed the footage again, and uploaded a copy to my cloud, just in case. And I made a decision. If she wanted to keep playing games, I was going to play back. And next time, it's made a huge impact. She wasn't going to see it coming. The next morning, I filed an official complaint to the HOA board. Now, I didn't really expect anything to come of it, especially since Karen was the president, but I figured, hey, might as well follow protocol before I start digging trenches in my front yard and installing landmines. I attached the video, included photos of the damage, and even quoted a few lines from the neighborhood charter about mutual respect between members. I sent it all to the email listed on the HOA website, which, by the way, looked like it was made in 2006 by someone's nephew. 2 days later, I got a response. Not from the board, not from a neighbor, nope. From Karen, it was a cease and desist letter. I'm not even joking. She accused me of slandering a board member, installing unauthorized surveillance, and, get this, violating the privacy rights of community traffic. What the hell even is that? He also informed me that the video footage I captured was a gross breach of HOA confidentiality, and that, if I didn't take down the footage immediately, she'd pursue legal action. Mind you, this is a mailbox, a damn mailbox. I didn't reply. I was still trying to decide whether this woman was crazy or just really, really bored. But I wasn't going to take the footage down. If anything, I was thinking about submitting it to one of those HOA horror story YouTube channels, or maybe starting my own. The following week, I replaced the mailbox again. Same style, same spot, double reinforced with a steel anchor, just to be safe. That same night, it was gone. Again. This time, she didn't even try to be sneaky about it. I caught her on camera, daylight, full frame, ramming her SUV into the mailbox, while blasting ABBA from her speakers like it was her personal demolition anthem. But here's the kicker. I posted the video in the private neighborhood Facebook group. Just the clip. No commentary. No accusations. I let the footage speak for itself. By morning, it had over 40 comments. Most were just shocked. A few people defended her, saying maybe she misjudged the curb, but then someone else posted their own footage. Karen had backed over their flower bed last month. And someone else chimed in about how she once hit a fire hydrant and blamed a kid on a bike. Apparently, this wasn't just my problem. And yet, when I showed up at the next HOA meeting, oh, you better believe I showed up. It was like stepping into a bad courtroom drama. Karen walked in with a binder, sunglasses on indoors, flanked by 2 board members who looked like they'd rather be anywhere else. The meeting began with the usual formalities, then I stood up during community concerns and calmly stated my case. I played the footage on a tablet. People gasped. Some whispered. Karen didn't blink. When I finished, she crossed her arms and said, "Mr. Richardson has presented evidence obtained through illegal means. The board will not recognize this footage as valid documentation." I blinked. What? Illegal means. It's a motion camera on my own garage pointing at my own mailbox, which is located on community land, she snapped, and therefore subject to HOA regulation. Your camera is an infringement on shared privacy zones. I looked around the room, half expecting someone to laugh. No one did. They were too stunned. That's when another neighbor, an older gentleman named Stan, raised his hand. "Karen, if he can't record his mailbox, how come you were allowed to install that license plate scanner on your driveway last year?" The room froze. Stan wasn't just a random guy. He'd been part of the HOA before Karen. Apparently, he stepped down because of stress, which now made a lot more sense. Karen's face tightened. "That scanner was approved by the board." Stan nodded. "Right, when you were the only board member who voted. You could feel the energy in the room shift. I knew in that moment I had backup. People were finally seeing the pattern. and maybe, just maybe, this little reign of HOA terror was starting to crack. But Karen wasn't done. That evening, I got a certified letter in the mail, a fine, from the HOA for installing unauthorized security equipment and creating community discord. It was for $370.00. I laughed. I genuinely laughed out loud. Then I walked back into the house, opened my laptop, and started planning something I probably should have done from the beginning. If Karen wanted to weaponize the HOA rules against me, fine. I was going to learn those rules better than she ever had. Because next time she tried to mess with my property, she was going to hit something she definitely didn't see coming. I wasn't going to just sit back and take it anymore. That night, I dove headfirst into the HOA rule book. Yes, all 86 pages of it, and I read every single word like it was a sacred text. If Karen wanted to play legal games, I was going to beat her at her own. Turns out, the HOA didn't have any specific rules about mailbox reinforcement. There were guidelines about placement, height, color coordination, and aesthetic harmony with the neighborhood, but nothing about internal structure or materials. So I paid a visit to my buddy Mike, who used to weld for a local construction company before retiring to make metal art and barbecue grills in his garage. "Can you build me a mailbox that can take a hit?" I asked. He grinned like I had just offered him front row tickets to NASCAR. "What kind of hit are we talking?" "A white BMW X5 with entitlement issues." He didn't even ask why. He just laughed and said, "Give me 3 days." And boy, did he deliver. What Mike built looked like a regular black mailbox with a nice wooden post, stained to match the others in the neighborhood. But beneath that charming little facade was a core of solid steel, welded to a rebar cage and sunk 4 feet into a concrete base. He even mounted the box on a spring system so it wouldn't visibly move if nudged lightly, but would resist anything harder than a squirrel's sneeze. It looked perfectly ordinary, HO compliant, but it was built like a tank. I installed it one sunny Saturday morning, made sure it was leveled, added reflective strips, and even called the city inspector to make sure it didn't violate any codes. Spoiler alert? It didn't. Not even close. And I waited. And I didn't have to wait long. 3 days later, on a Tuesday morning, I was sipping coffee in my kitchen when I heard it. Ha-ha. A loud, hollow whoomp, followed by the distinct sound of something scraping and cracking. I bolted outside, and there it was. Karen's precious BMW, nose buried into my new mailbox. Hood crumpled like a soda can. The bumper had popped off on one side. One headlight was shattered. And, my personal favorite, the front airbags had deployed. I'll be honest, I had to bite my lip to keep from smiling. Karen was standing outside her car, hands on her hips, face as red as a fire hydrant. "You sabotaged your mailbox," she screamed. I tilted my head. "Nope, just reinforced it. Totally HO approved. Want to see the city inspector sign off?" She pointed a trembling finger at me. "This is intentional damage. You're endangering the community." I gestured at the steel post, still perfectly upright. "You ran into my mailbox, on my property, again." Karen pulled out her phone, snapping photos while muttering things like lawsuit, criminal negligence, and my personal favorite, domestic terrorism. That's when a police cruiser pulled up. One of my neighbors had called them, probably thinking it was another HOA meltdown. Officer Reyes, a guy I'd seen a few times around the neighborhood, stepped out and surveyed the scene. Karen launched into her monologue. "This man built a death trap disguised as a mailbox. He's targeting me personally. This is harassment. Reyes turned to me. You have footage? Of course I do. We went inside. I showed him the motion camera footage, Karen swerving deliberately off the road and into the mailbox. No dogs in the road, no kids, no distractions. Just pure, petty vandalism. Reyes exhaled sharply and shook his head. You'd think she'd learned the first 3 times. He walked back outside, said something to Karen I couldn't hear. Her face dropped. Then he handed her something, probably a ticket, and she shrieked like someone just insulted her casserole at a church potluck. He stormed off, car still smoking, and called for a tow. The mailbox? Not a scratch. But she wasn't done. Not by a long shot. 2 days later, I got another letter, this time from a law firm. Karen was suing me. She claimed I willfully created a malicious obstruction and knowingly placed a hazard in a residential zone with intent to inflict damage upon vehicles and psychological harm upon the driver. Yep, psychological harm. She was also demanding $3,500, 0 cents for vehicle repairs and emotional distress. I couldn't believe it. This woman had vandalized my property 3 separate times, and now she wanted me to pay for her broken car and bruised ego? But you know what? I wasn't worried, because what she didn't know was that I wasn't just some random homeowner with a grudge. I used to be an engineer for a military defense contractor. And that mailbox was child's play compared to what I could have built. Getting sued by someone who literally wrecked my property multiple times felt like being mugged and then billed for the inconvenience, but I wasn't panicking. In fact, I welcomed it. Because Karen may have brought a lawyer, but I had something much more powerful. Documentation. The day after receiving the lawsuit notice, I called up my friend Lily, an attorney who specialized in civil litigation. She was sharp, sarcastic, and absolutely lived for HOA horror stories. When I told her what was going on, she practically begged to take the case. You were telling me she hit your mailbox 3 times and then sued you because she wrecked her car on it? I nodded. Oh my God, she said, grabbing her notepad. This is my Super Bowl. We filed a counterclaim, destruction of private property, harassment, intentional infliction of emotional distress. I wasn't just playing defense. I was coming for the HOA Queen's crown. And the court date was set for 2 weeks out. In the meantime, Karen kept up the pressure. HOA notices piled up at my door, petty infractions. My trash bins were visible from the street. My grass was 0.75 inches taller than acceptable height. My cat sitting on the porch was a distraction to neighborhood dogs. She was grasping at straws. But it didn't matter. I kept everything, screenshots, letters, video, witness statements from neighbors, every tiny piece of her madness. When the court day came, I wore my best suit, walked into the small claims courtroom with Lily beside me, and saw Karen already seated at the plaintiff's table. Decked out like she was on her way to a country club luncheon, her lawyer, some smarmy guy in a pinstripe suit who clearly thought he was Perry Mason, kept smirking like this was an easy win. He opened with drama, of course. Your Honor, my client was the victim of a maliciously reinforced mailbox, designed not only to withstand vehicular impact, but to cause damage. This device was built with military-grade materials for the express purpose of endangering residents. The judge raised an eyebrow. A mailbox? Karen chimed in from behind her lawyer. It's a death trap. I'm still recovering from the trauma. Lily stood up slowly and smiled like a lioness about to pounce. Your Honor, we have footage of Ms. Karen Whitmore intentionally veering off the road multiple times to strike Mr. Richardson's mailbox. In addition, we have documentation proving that the mailbox in question was built to city code inspected and approved by a municipal official, and installed after repeated vandalism incidents. She handed the judge a thick folder, pictures, emails, time-stamped video stills. It was like presenting a greatest hits album of Karen's bad decisions. And then Lily delivered the final blow. Also, for the record, Mr. Richardson has over 15 years of experience in structural engineering, including designing non-lethal perimeter barriers for military outposts. The mailbox in question, while sturdy, poses no risk unless someone deliberately rams into it, which, as we've shown, Miss Whitmore has done, repeatedly. The courtroom was silent. The judge flipped through the file, took one look at the photo of Karen's SUV halfway up the reinforced mailbox post, and muttered, "Jesus." Karen tried to speak again, but the judge raised a hand. "Ma'am, I'm going to be honest with you. This looks less like an accident and more like a grudge match, one that you instigated." Her face turned crimson, her lawyer leaned in, whispered something, and she froze. 10 minutes later, the judge dismissed her lawsuit. Not only that, he ruled in my favor. Karen had to pay damages for the 3 destroyed mailboxes, reimburse legal fees, and cease any further contact unless through official HOA communication channel. It was a win, a full-on, slam-dunk, nothing-but-net victory. But it got better, because when I walked out of that courtroom stand, the retired HOA member was waiting outside. "I heard how it went," he said, grinning. "About damn time someone stood up to her." "Thanks," I said. "I didn't do it just for me. She's been bullying this whole neighborhood." He nodded. "Yeah, and we're done with it." 2 weeks later, Karen was removed as HOA president. Apparently, there was a clause in the bylaws about conduct bringing disrepute to the board. Between the court case, the Facebook group drama, and the fact that 3 more neighbors came forward with their own video clips of Karen being Karen, well, the vote was unanimous. She lost her title. She lost her power trip. She even lost her car, which her insurance refused to cover due to intentional negligence. As for me, I still have that mailbox, still standing, still pristine, not a dent, not a scratch, not even a scuff. The only thing Karen managed to damage in the end was her own reputation. You'd think after losing in court, getting publicly embarrassed, and being voted out of her HOA throne, Karen would have taken the hint and slithered into the background. You'd be wrong. Because narcissists don't retreat, they regroup. And Karen, being Karen, wasn't going to let a court ruling, a broken bumper, and a bruised ego stop her from having the last word. It started subtly, petty, really. One morning, I walked outside to find my trash can tipped over. Just mine, not anyone else's. A few days later, someone left a fake notice of violation taped to my door with a forged HOA letterhead, claiming my mailbox was intimidating in appearance. Honestly, I kind of liked that one. Then came the dog poop. Literal bags of it, neatly knotted, placed on my porch like passive-aggressive presents. She didn't even try to hide it. My security camera caught her once, walking her Pomeranian past my house, pausing, and oh so casually dropping it, like she was leaving a thank you note. At that point, I was done playing defense. So I brought it all to the HOA. Now that Karen was no longer president, the board actually listened. Stan had stepped in as interim, and a few of the other neighbors who had been quiet before finally felt safe enough to speak up. Turned out I wasn't the only one Karen had been tormenting. She ticketed one guy for painting his shutters too cheerful. Another woman had been fined for using non-regulation mulch, and let's not forget the guy who got a written warning because his inflatable Halloween ghost projected negative energy. Yeah, that happened. So the board made a decision, not just to ban Karen from serving on the HOA ever again, but to formally censure her. Now, most people don't even know what censure means. In an HOA context, it's basically a public spanking with paperwork. They printed an official letter stating she was in violation of neighborhood civility clauses, that she had abused her power as president, and that she was no longer permitted to file complaints about other residents unless she had proof of a legitimate violation. You heard a voice go back with most people. She hated it. You could tell she was being forced to wear a scarlet letter. She even started avoiding eye contact with most people. Yeah. And then one day she disappeared, packed up, moved out. Her house went up for sale with a different realtor than the one she always forced everyone in the HOA to use. A big "for sale" sign stood out front like a silent apology to the whole street. I should have felt triumphant. But honestly, I just felt done. Done with the drama, done with the surveillance, done with living in a place where you had to fight tooth and nail just to exist in peace. So I hosted a block party. Nothing big, just a few grills, some folding chairs, music, cornhole, and enough burgers to feed an army. I invited every house on the street, even folks I'd never spoken to before. And for the first time since I moved in, the neighborhood, people smiled, laughed, swapped stories. Someone even brought a sheet cake that said, "Bye, Karen," in frosted pink letters. It was a good night, and you know what stood tall in the background the whole time? That damn mailbox. Sturdy, straight, unbothered. A monument to boundaries, literal and otherwise. I've thought a lot since then about how something as simple as a mailbox could become the center of so much chaos. But the truth is, it wasn't just about the mailbox. It was about control. About how some people will do anything to feel powerful, even if it means destroying someone else's peace. And how the only way to deal with that kind of person is to stop giving them permission to wreck your life. You don't fight fire with fire. You build a mailbox out of steel, pour a concrete base, and let them crash into their own behavior. Again and again and again, until they're the ones who break. Moral of the story: sometimes the best revenge is just standing your ground. Literally. And if someone ever tries to knock you down over and over again, just make sure the next version of you is reinforced. Thanks for listening. And hey, if you've ever had a Karen in your life, drop it in the comments, because you are not alone.